Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Collaborative Consulting's webinar on Evolving the Life Sciences Information Architecture. We have two fantastic and knowledgeable speakers with us today, Chris Jennings and Vic Stamba, both of Collaborative Consulting. Chris is the Vice President of Collaborative's Technology Services practice. He's responsible for overseeing Collaborative's non-industry related services, including information management, software solutions, business process and program management, and software performance and quality. In this role, he guides the company's thought leadership, service development, and technology partnerships. As a practitioner, Chris has over 15 years consulting in the information management discipline. He's an expert in data integration and data warehouse architecture and technologies. He has served many industries throughout his career and had a particular focus on the life science industry. Prior to joining Collaborative, Chris was a senior member of the Computer Science Corporation's National Data Warehouse practice. Joining Chris today, we have Vic Stamba. Vic is Vice President of Collaborative Consulting's Life Sciences practice. He is responsible for leading and overseeing Collaborative's information management solutions and service offerings to the pharmaceutical industry, with a focus on data integration, master data management, business intelligence, decision support, and data governance for commercial business operations. Vic is an executive with more than 20 years of experience in information management and technology consulting, specializing in enterprise information architecture, strategy and planning, and program management for life sciences companies. In addition to his current commercial operations focus, Vic has also led and supported numerous initiatives in clinical, safety, and regulatory areas. And without further ado, I will turn the program over to Chris and Vic. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I'm sure most of you will agree that the life sciences industry is continuing to undergo significant change and in some ways transformation. I think with patent expirations giving rise to generics, the new Affordable Care Act, we see more of an increased focus of biotechnology, focusing on rare and complex disease states. For most companies, these changes and shifts represent a change in their business models, and with that change in the business model and the shift in the industry, also comes changes to business processes and the underlying information architectures that support them. What we wanted to do during this webinar today is really present a couple of perspectives. First, from the business side, I think the business users that are in the audience, we want to make you aware that in the context of these changes, what the impact to some of the underlying information architectures are, and some of the challenges that your IT and information management groups are going to be facing over the next couple of years. And conversely, for those folks on the technology side, it may be a good opportunity for you to just see what some of these market shifts are and what your business partners are up to. Our experience in working with clients has really shown that those companies that are best suited for success are the ones that really share a common understanding across their technology groups and their business groups and plan and work accordingly. So before we get started, just a couple minutes on Collaborative Consulting. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a privately held management and technology consultancy. We are celebrating our 15th year in business this year. We have approximately 400 employees with offices in multiple locations. Our headquarters are outside of Boston. We have numerous other locations and a solutions development center in Wausau, Wisconsin. As was mentioned, we have a couple of core competencies, four primary that we offer to clients both in life sciences, financial, and other diversified industries, those being business architecture and program management, software performance and quality, software solutions, and of course, Chris and my favorite is information management. So with Chris leading the services group and also focusing heavily on IM solutions, our practices, and Chris and I in particular, have had the opportunity to work on multiple engagements over the past couple of years. So hopefully, between the two of us, we'll be able to share some of our experience, based not only on what we're seeing with our clients, but also what we're seeing in the industry. Let's take a look at what we'll be covering today. All right. We're going to talk primarily about the confluence of really three key factors that we see the life sciences industry facing and companies within it. I think over the past couple of years, I mean, we've probably all seen that maybe the heyday of the big pharma blockbusters is coming to a close and really giving rise more to generic therapies with new specialties, legislation, and increased payer influence. Companies are continually looking at changes to their business models to not only gain but sustain that market access. I think in conjunction with that, we're also seeing the role of life sciences companies shift as they become a little bit more integral, just as a result of not only the legislation but some of these other payer insurer influences. But they're becoming more integral, I think, to the overall continuum of care, focusing a little more on not just marketing the drug, but really focusing more on overall patient outcomes. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. The third thing that we see is really sort of the data and technology explosion, right? Especially as more information is becoming available over the years, there's just more and more data that now can come together and really be used and leveraged within the information architecture. So, in years, and we're already starting to see the use of clinical data from electronic health records and analysis of patient profiles and demographics within plans and things like that. So, as we introduce more technologies such as cloud and mobile and big data and those sorts of things, I think we're going to see those work their way into the information architecture as well. So we're really going to talk about those three things today. So I think from an information architecture perspective, all of these things have really a profound effect with respect to the size and nature of the data and the information that we're managing. I mean, we're kind of seeing that data explosion, and actually the industry has coined the term big data over the past few years. So that applies to the life sciences industry as well. The technology platforms, and I think the other thing that we want to really consider is the governance component as well. So as more of this data becomes available to life sciences companies, especially at a patient level, now we have policies and procedures and things like that really need to come into play to protect the data and make sure that it's being used appropriately. And so our objective today is really just to drill into some of these trends and look at what we can do to, essentially ready the information architecture for up and coming needs. As the chart denotes, this is more a conversation around commercial information architecture. There's probably a whole series of webinars that could be done on the R&D side, but for purposes of today's discussion, we're going to concentrate on the commercial side. So let's take a look kind of at the purpose and sort of the mission of an information architecture within the life sciences ecosystem. One of the key characteristics that we as consultants try to strive to achieve in our clients' information architecture is responsiveness, right? So responsiveness is in any business is really critical to not only formulating the correct strategies for your company to follow and kind of provide guidance, but also to actually execute effectively. And pharma, as you all know, is a very highly data-driven industry. So an information architecture that's well-tuned, that's adaptable, that's responsive, is really critical to not only operational efficiencies, but to the strategic decision making pretty much at every level. If you look at how companies typically plan and operate, they usually operate in the context of a strategy, and the strategies are really driven by two things. First of all are the internal drivers, right? So that's the value proposition and the differentiation that you intend to go to market with. That's the value of your product, the therapeutic areas that you're in, your strategy for promotion, whether it's a partnership with other companies, all sorts of things kind of go into what makes up your particular value proposition. And then you're operating in this external environment that has lots of different factors to it, right? So everything from the legislative things that we've seen recently. We've got competitors that are launching similar products in similar areas. We've got the whole insurer payer plan network to deal with. We've got healthcare professionals, distributors, patients. So all of those, all of the activities within, sort of all those entities come together with your value proposition to essentially, drive your strategy. And from there, what happens is you put together your tactical plan. So that's where you take that strategy and deploy it out to your business groups, or your contracting group, your sales group, marketing, distribution, everything, anything and everything that has to do with basically enacting that strategy, executing and interacting with the market that you're trying to penetrate. And so this becomes, more a continuous loop. And what a good information architecture really does, it sort of sits in the middle there. And as you're, experiencing activities and getting feedback from external events, you're looking at what the market's doing, you're looking at how you're executing, you're really able to, with a responsive architecture, do course corrections and do sort of educated course corrections and do them quickly, right? Based on, a good set of information that's really guiding you the right way. So as your business evolves and you have more and more products and you start dealing with more and more things in the external, that information architecture by nature will evolve, right? So we like to kind of use the terminology that, it's giving you the ability to have visibility to the what, in other words, what's happening in the market, and it also gives you the visibility to the now what, so that as your information architecture essentially represents your business, you're able to more accurately predict what's going to take place. So as I mentioned, it's a very highly data-driven environment. So we've got data points and pockets of information everywhere. So if you look at all these entities on the right and all the transactions and all the interactions that go on there, it becomes very complex very quickly. What you're trying to do with that information is then execute, in all of these different, what we would call business use cases. So whether it's contracting, whether it's your promotions, marketing, sales, patient services, et cetera, you're using all of that data to basically make decisions and execute in all of these business use cases, right? So one of the things that, where there's a couple things really, that is really the mission of the information architecture in terms of decision making, right? One is, as the chart says, are your strategies well founded, right? So do you have enough good information that you're able to really, put together a strategy and tactical plans that are working? And then sort of what are the levels or the levers in your business, right? What things work well? What things do you want to track? What are the key performance indicators that say whether or not we're on track to our strategy, whether or not our strategy is effective? What kind of course corrections do we make? we want our information model also to represent risks and dependencies. So, that predictability and, it's where you get into the more advanced analytics around, confidence levels and things like that of particular events. That is, again, the role of the architecture and the information model is really to supply all of your enterprise with the information to really understand how well your strategies are working and how well you as an organization are executing to those strategies. Right? One of the things that we use is a model that we call the information management maturity model, right? And it's essentially a yardstick. It's an assessment tool to really measure the overall capabilities of an information management architecture, right? We found it to be applicable practically to any environment, ranging from very early stage, pre-commercial organizations into, very well-established, mature companies, right? And so with any maturity model, it has its rankings that go from the without to the beginning, to the established, to the improved, to the optimal, right? And there's kind of a natural progression that once you kind of get to that optimal state, things in your world start to change, and you eventually slip back down to the improved state and kind of come back to the optimal state and so forth. I think, and we'll talk about this a little later, is that, as you're looking at these changes and kind of the velocity of the changes in the marketplace today and in the industry, you want to make sure that your architecture is evolving at a pace and in the areas where it should be evolving, and that you're not slipping backwards, too many steps. So the model really, is set out to manage a couple things, right? And you can see there's several key dimensions there, right? So it has to do with the breadth and depth of information, how complete and accurate, how timely is the information. Another thing that we see is that a lot of organizations have really, they have good architectures, but the problem, from a data and technology standpoint, the problem is that the data isn't really utilized across the company, and that there's, in some cases, not a single version of the truth. So part of the strength and part of the maturity of a good information architecture is that it is utilized across the enterprise, and it is really accepted and adopted as a single version of the truth, right? Some other capabilities really are sophistication, reliability of your analytics and indicator models, again, kind of getting back to predictability. The maturity of your governance models, what policies and procedures do you have there for data administration and security, change management, communication, those sorts of things. Automation, operational efficiencies, how quickly can you move information and data through the architecture and really provide service and value out to your business users. And then one of the things that's very important to the model is really around supportability and cost effectiveness. So in some cases, we see organizations that can actually produce, some sophisticated things from their data warehouses and business intelligence environment, but it's at a significant cost too, because they're leveraging or not leveraging new technology and kind of relying on old technology. In some cases, they're still manually knitting together reports that go out to their user community. They get it done, but it's at a cost. So, all of these things kind of play into the maturity model. And as you look at the market shifts and changes in the market, you want to really look at what kinds of new data and information will be needed, right? How does that data need to be integrated, what kinds of things within the new things within the data need to be included in your indicator models and as performance indicator. How is the data being used? How is it being governed, et cetera? So, we found that this model, and basically if if we expanded the model into our giant matrix, you would see characteristics in each one of those dimensions that kind of assess whether you're in a without, beginning, established, improved state. So in some cases, your technology may be in one state, and your governance processes may be in another, or whatever. So that's a great model to use. We want to switch gears here a little bit. We've been talking, kind of about the information architecture and the information model. We're going to get back to that, but we do want to talk a little bit more about, some of the market shifts and things that we're seeing that are really more or less affecting this whole, the whole information architecture. There's a couple key ones here. I mean, I think as we go through each one of these could probably be their own webinar in their own right, but just to give you sort of a broad brush of the things that we're really seeing that are I think, pertinent to information architecture transformation. We decided to, pick a few and talk about them. I think one of the sort of the overarching factors is sort of the legislation and regulatory oversight. And there, I mean, just recently you can see legislation around like for the supply chain, we've got the upcoming track and trace or serialization. That represents really a significant impact to the information architecture around supply chain and the distribution network, because not only does your information architecture need to start tracking much more data at a much more granular level than it ever did. That data is coming from third parties and partners in your supply chain. So not only must you track the data, you also need the technology and the processes and the governance to really manage those third-party interactions and transact with them. The other thing that we've seen this year, which is again involves a lot of granular data. It involves a lot of third-party data collection and aggregation is transparency reporting, or open payments, or the Sunshine Act. So that's kind of transformed over the years from being state-mandated programs now to federal, and in the coming years we're seeing that expand into foreign countries as well that require transparency reporting. By the way, both of those topics, supply chain and transparency, they're actually the subject of other webinars that we've done. So again, they can really kind of stand on their own as topic areas to get into. But we did want to mention that. And then, of course, the other one is the Affordable Health Care Act. And we'll talk a little bit about that, because that does impact some of these other areas that we're seeing here. But when you look at a high level, what that means, I guess, from even kind of from a volume level, right, is that they estimate about 30 to 35 million new patients by the year 2020 coming into the fold, right? So that has a lot of implications around just the amount of data that needs to be tracked as we get into more patient-level type services, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There's more data around patients to track, and it also has some implications on your promotional model too, and how you get to doctors that are now busy seeing patients rather than seeing pharma reps. So there's a couple impacts there we'll get into here in a minute. So we see the market influences shifting. As I mentioned before, we're seeing patent expirations on some of the blockbusters, giving way to generics. one of the things with the Affordable Health Care Act that it now gives a little bit more patent exclusivity to biologics and those those classes of drugs. So with that, we're seeing a lot more interest in the biotech sector. We're seeing some of the larger pharma companies now concentrating a little bit more on their specialty lines, concentrating on more chronic disease states, complex disease states, rare diseases. So all of that is kind of, if you think about what it used to be with the antacids and the cholesterol medicines and things like that a couple years ago, that is kind of giving way a little bit more to, some of these more specialty type therapies. So I think the other issue that we're seeing here also is that of insurers, right? So the goal of getting formulary access and maintaining formulary access has really been a focus for a lot of commercial organizations over the past couple of years, and we've seen a lot more attention to things around commercial analytics and contract analytics and payer and plan profiling and those sorts of things as well. So that's I think in the upcoming years under the with the new healthcare and under that legislation, we're going to see a lot, probably a lot more and different types of plans that need to be kind of analyzed and tracked as to whether or not you want to gain access to those formularies, and if you do, at what cost, and so on. So a couple items there. So I think the other thing that kind of goes it goes a little bit hand in hand with this is the change in promotional models. So I think what we're seeing now, and we're seeing it actually in a lot of companies, is that a lot of the spend, the spend on promotional programs is really outpacing the revenue growth, right? So what it's doing is causing companies to sort of reevaluate where their marketing mixes are and where their mix of spend dollars are with respect to personal promotion to professionals, sampling, consumer marketing, market access to plans with rebates and fees and those sorts of things, right? So the fact of the matter is that those models really have to change over the next couple of years, or the spend is actually going to catch up to the revenue, and that will really shrink the profit margin. So I think what it does is it kind of gives way to other ways to attack the market, right? Through more non-personal promotion, multi-channel marketing. I think there's also a little bit less emphasis on focusing on individual physicians and kind of like, quote, high target prescribers, and now there's, I think, a little bit more focus on looking at how those prescribers are affiliated to different practices and accounts, and looking at strategies around account-based selling to influence the market more that way. So I think, again, almost going hand in hand with that is really how the business operations are becoming a little bit more decentralized, right? So we see that, kind of the needs can vary geographically from region to region. I mean, you have variations in, first of all, patient population. So the patient population in Florida is a little bit different than it is in Wisconsin. You've got, regional payers and plans that have influence there. You've got, big practices and key opinion leaders and things like that. So there's differences really in terms of how professionals approach approach the market as well. So what we've seen over the years is a lot of the decision making being pushed down to the regional level. So especially around around things like promotional spend and targeting strategies and account penetration strategies and so forth. Right. So I think when you look at these these couple of factors in kind of in the aggregate, you can see that there's a lot of interrelationships. There's a lot of data points. There's a lot of cause and effect, right? Especially when we're looking at how we mix our dollars to affect insurers, how we get to different practices, how we get how much we spend on consumers and things, or consumer promotion and things like that. So a tremendous amount of basically cause and effect in the information model. So we'll talk about that in a couple minutes as well. We have a couple examples that we'll get to. So one of the last trends that I think we wanted to cover here before we actually dive into the information architecture piece of it, and we've kind of alluded to this in the past couple slides, is that we're seeing the pharma companies and the biotechs become more and more involved in sort of the continuum of patient care, right? One interesting statistic is that for a lot of patients that have chronic diseases, we're talking like diabetes and hemophilia and multiple sclerosis and those kinds of things. There's about half of the patients, right, with these ongoing conditions really become non-compliant with their medication over the course of the first year. So not only do those patients represent an increased risk to insurers, I mean, for the cost of just increased morbidity, more serious conditions down the road, like stroke and heart disease and things like that. But it also represents lost revenue and profits for the manufacturers, right? So we're seeing that the manufacturer is becoming more involved sort of in that overall cycle of patient care by offering more than just the drug and the therapy, but sort of reaching out with services like disease management programs and education programs, prevention programs, nursing visits, support groups, and things like that. So, in essence, it really, helps improve the overall patient outcomes, which is another area where I think, some of this formulary positioning and price justification is going to end up in a few years. Because the pharma companies essentially become more attractive to the insurers. For the insurer, there's sort of an overall reduction in risk in the population that has those disease states. And so for the pharma companies, it also represents, just a way to increase and maintain ongoing revenue. So it's kind of it's sort of a win-win-win, if you will, right? So the patients maybe get better overall care, with complementary services from pharma companies. The insurers lower their risk to some extent, and the pharma companies are kind of reaping the benefit of having an increased patient population that's more compliant, really more compliant with their medication, right? So I think from an information architecture, you're looking at new data sources to track and manage all these patient services and outcomes. There's a lot of syndicated data sources out there that are now collecting and aggregating electronic health records from plan networks and things like that. So essentially, at some point in time, that outcome data, you'll have real empirical evidence that your therapy combined with your service offerings are better than your competitors to gain access and so forth. and then I think if you look at the number of organizations and partners that your companies would team with, you're going to find a lot more in the way of integration, data integration, cloud, mobile devices, those sorts of things. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris and have him do a little bit more of a deep dive on the architecture.
To give you all a little bit of a checkpoint, I have about 10 minutes of material to take you through on the information architecture. We'll do a quick summary and then take some questions over the chat over the chat feature. Vic's been talking about the business market forces that have been changing the information architecture. There's also technology forces that are making it exponentially harder to meet the needs of the business and making it easy to fall behind. As Vic discussed on earlier slides, over the past several years, in healthcare and life sciences industry has begun significant change. He talked about the patent expirations giving rise to generics, the Affordable Care Act, increased focus by biotech and in our specialty groups focusing on rare and complex diseases. He also talked about the business models for most companies undergoing significant change. He talked about promotional spend outpacing revenue, legislative and regulatory oversight in the supply chain, promotional spend, and a few other areas. About the market influences shifting to less differentiated, more generics for pharma, more influence from the insurers, the payers, the PBMs, less emphasis on traditional individual HCP interactions. Those are the business drivers Vic's been talking about in the last few slides. There's also some architectural drivers. I'm going to touch on a couple of the ones that are on this slide. First one is the cloud. The cloud encourages data that was traditionally centralized to be distributed. In life sciences, an increasing number of business applications are being moved to the cloud. It started with Salesforce.com a few years back. Many companies with the adoption of Viva and other Salesforce.com-based SFAs, but it's continued. Aggregate spend applications, marketing automation applications, and even master data management applications are being moved into the cloud. This decentralization is introducing some pretty interesting challenges for a company's information architecture. You got to be able to answer certain questions like, how do I ensure seamless integration with the cloud? And do I even have the right technologies to do that? Is the data going to be secure out in that cloud? And how do I secure it and transport from the cloud back to internal systems? And how do I ensure that the governance rules that we've spent countless hours working on are able to be enforced within the cloud? Another interesting architectural driver is big data. Many of us information architects are trying to define what to do with this amorphous topic. One shift in analytic practices that collaborative feels big data helps us enable, that is particularly interesting in the life sciences industry, is predictive analytics. In life sciences, it's been talked about for years, but in our experience, rarely achieved. In past, we've seen businesses spend a lot of time trying to identify what's happened in the past. We're starting to see the shift into questions like, why did it happen, and even what is going to happen. Some of the big data enabling technologies help answer these new questions. And as technologists, we need to enable these business clients to answer those questions through the innovative application of technology. So what's going to happen if organizations do not proactively address this convergence of forces? So don't let the changes to the business and architectural drivers discussed in the last slide push you backwards in this maturity model that Vic talked through earlier. You have invested a lot of money, a lot of time building your existing information model. You need to make sure that you're planning for change to it. We've listed out here a few areas to focus on. The structural changes aspect we'll talk about in some level of detail in the next few slides. Scalability and flexibility that you planned into your architectures are going to be put to the test. The need to integrate with the cloud and an increasing number of third parties requires that you add new flexibility to your data integration architectures and potentially to the technologies that support them. With so much of your corporate assets being moved outside of your organization, your data is being managed, and your data is being managed externally, some of the control that you've historically been able to enforce at the point of entry is diminished. And you must ensure that you have a hardened quality control framework to address the inevitable quality challenges you'll have with this data as it comes back in-house. We are seeing an expansion of master data subject areas. We've seen historically, and I'm going to talk about this again on the next few slides, healthcare professional, healthcare organizations be put under a master data management program, which is the combination of business processes and systems to support the management of your core entities. We've seen the expansion of what entities are being formally managed. And I'll talk about those in the next few slides. You have an increasing amount of personally identifiable information in your systems, from the prescriber patient data. You have to make sure that you're complying with state and federal regulations guiding the management of that data. And look to answer questions like, have you appropriately masked sensitive information in your non-production environments? We have seen a few instances in the industry where that is not the case. Big data is bringing the need for new technology skills. In the past decade, as information technology professionals and information management professionals, the technologies have become more simplistic and have driven us to be more efficient in the way we deliver value to the business. But it's also taking away some of the real deep core technology skills. Big data is bringing the need for those skills back in, so we all need to skill up. Slide is I apologize, is not depicting as well on the webinar as it does in PowerPoint. Depicted on this slide in the background is the commercial information reference model, what many of us techies call a commercial data model. So we've been talking about a lot of changes. And does your reference model or conceptual data model have the flexibility built in to handle the changes we've been discussing? The next few slides will take you through the high-level changes we see happening to two key subject areas. The two areas are customer and patient. Oops. There we go. Customer for many organizations is defined by healthcare professional and healthcare organizations. Even when other clients define customer entities that include things such as payers and plans and non-prescribing professionals, the information architecture is typically less mature in those areas. We see two major changes happening in this area. As the selling model changes and many organizations adopt key account management processes, the need for comprehensive affiliation data is necessary. In our experience, the information architecture of many organizations are not equipped to handle the complexity of account affiliations. We also see an increasing demand for the conformance of payers and plans across your managed markets and commercial data sets. This will drive changes in both your model, your conceptual model, and your data integration approaches, because often those data sets are held separate. We'll move next to patient. And as Vic outlined early in the webinar, there's an increased focus on therapeutic coverage for rare and complex disease states. With these more complicated and expensive therapies, many organizations will expand their patient services programs, where they probably exist today, but the programs within that area of the business are going to be increased. This is going to inevitably lead to an increase of both identifiable and de-identified patient data within your information architecture. You really need to make sure that your security models are up to snuff with your state and local, state and federal regulations. With patient, one of the areas that I find particularly interesting is the question of should patient data be treated as a master data subject area with the same level of discipline that healthcare professionals has been for years. So with that security conversation notwithstanding, it'll be an interesting thing. We don't see master data management solutions from the business and from the technology side, focused on patient broadly. It'll be interesting over the next few years to see how that changes. There also may be a demand within the organization to track patients as they move from product to product within the same indication, or maybe even across indications, and track the patient and be able to provide them an experience and an interaction with your company that reaches a high level of customer satisfaction. If this is the case, it means that a full master data management business processes and technologies need to be applied to patient data. So Vic and I have both given you a lot to think about. Some of the points that we have made likely apply to your current situation, and others may not. You're probably thinking, what am I supposed to do with this information? Collaborative recommends that you take this as a call for action to execute an information management strategy. Depicted on this slide is collaborative standard information management strategy approach. After the project is effectively initiated, the strategy focus is on the analysis of 5 key areas that you'll see in the middle of this diagram. Business requirements, information and data analysis, technical architecture, including platforms, governance model, and the organization and support model. After the analysis of these 5 areas is complete, you'll need to do a gap against your current state and against the business and technical requirements of the future state to see where there are holes. This analysis is going to allow you to have a thoughtful architectural blueprint and roadmap to address the gaps you find in your existing architectures. Whether you're engaged with a professional services firm to guide you through this process or you're executing internally, we really feel as collaborators there's no better time within life sciences to start this type of strategy than now. Vic's now going to take us through some closing thoughts, and then we'll take questions over the chat feature.
Great, thanks, Chris. Well, as Chris mentioned, hopefully this webinar has given you some, at least some food for thought, and has raised some awareness of some of the things that are going to be coming down the pike and some of the things that are in store over the next couple of years. I think with all that's going on in the industry today, it really is an opportune time to look at how your organization may be affected and how to future-proof your information architecture. I think you probably gleaned from the conversation that Chris and I are both proponents of an architected approach. And by an architected approach, we mean a planned approach, so that that your information architecture, if you kind of get back to the concept of responsiveness, is consistently responsive, as opposed to responding to business needs with bolt-on solutions. And a lot of times we use the analogy of building a house, and when you build the house and you have plans for a sunroom, but you can't afford the sunroom, at least you know where the sunroom is going to go, so that at the point in time when you decide to add it, it fits in with the rest of the design, and it's readily suited to the whole architecture plan. And the same goes for your information model. Every now and then it's very very valuable to take a step back, really look at what's coming down the pike, and look at how that's going to affect your organization, and have conversations between business and IT, and so that everybody's more or less on the same page in terms of where they believe opportunities are, where risks and dependencies might be, and what a viable strategy going forward to address some of these things could be. So, as Chris said, I think our advice at this juncture is really to maybe take time and look at how some of these things affect, and formally do it. Use that roadmap technology or the roadmap methodology. Use the maturity model to really give yourself an objective perspective on what you're good at and where you might have some gaps. with that, I think we're coming close to the end of the webinar, but we do have time for some questions, if there are any, and I see some being. Do we have any posted here yet? Let's see. Did have one just to kind of get the conversation started, and we we kind of alluded to it before, but I think it's Chris. This would probably be best answered by you. Is really the effect of big data. I mean, I think everybody's heard a lot. They've heard the term big data, and I think everybody has kind of a different perception of what that is. But I think it might be good to maybe just take a deep dive into that and sort of explain what it is and really where it might be applicable in life sciences in upcoming years.
Yeah, Vic, I can take a stab at that one. So in the information management space, we're really looking for, starting with some definition around what big data is. As I said earlier, it's a pretty amorphous concept, and frankly, I think it will over the years. The term will probably go away. I think it'll become many other terms. We think that Gartner Research's definition of big data is probably the best. They define it by the 3 V's. Some of you might be familiar with that. It's volume, velocity, and variety. Volume pointing at exactly that, effectively number of rows of information. In life sciences, it's always been an industry that has had large volumes of information. So the volume's kind of always been there. We do expect that there is going to be an increased explosion in that as it applies to multiple things. With the Affordable Care Act, with more patients having access to therapies, we do expect additional information to need to be integrated. We also expect additional data sources with electronic medical records, lower levels of granularity to the data that we can receive. There's going to be an explosion on the volume side to an industry that already has a lot of data. Velocity is how fast those changes come in. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this within the commercial side of life sciences in the future. We've moved, during the last decade from looking back at the syndicated data coming in monthly to weekly. Will that move to a more frequent time frame? And then are there other data sources that will move to a lower level of latency where you're streaming in information? And then variety is the different types of data sources. It's going to be very interesting within life sciences to see what gets done with data, with social data. So data streaming in from the likes of Facebook and Twitter and other social media sites. We've had many conversations on the responsibility of the pharmaceutical industry if they are reading that information, what they need to do when they come across an adverse event, and the complexities that'll bring in. But that addresses the variety side. The other thing that Gartner does talk about in some of their materials, but it's kind of missing from the V's definition, is techniques. We really are seeing a trend to more advanced analytic techniques being applied. It's a lot of times data has been sent out to some of the data vendors to do more statistical analysis against data. A lot of market research groups have been doing it for a while. I think that type of statistical analysis against data is going to become more and more prevalent, more and more mainstream, even outside of the market research groups. And also, and I talked about this earlier, was predictive analytics. I think, again, it's been talked about for many years and is likely to increase usage with some of these enabling technologies. The other change I think it will have to the pharmaceutical industry may not be as direct business value. It may help with some performance. So you may be able to apply some of these technologies simply to improve performance of either some of your data processing or response times in some of your applications. That's the technical side of the answer to that question, Vic.
Great, thanks, Chris. We we did have a question come in. Says the business requires the speed and agility, but it seems that our IT is not prepared for the change. How do we convince our IT group to move to cloud and look at new technology platforms? So that's a great question, and we could probably go on for another 15 or 20 minutes around it. I think the short answer is that you really need to present to your IT group. Usually it's the other way around, by the way, where the IT group is saying, hey, we got cloud and mobile, and how do you guys want to use it? I think in this case, as business users, if you have a vision on what you want to do, and you have conceptual use cases, we'll call it that for now, that really have some, kind of distinct endpoints and some, value kind of at the end of it. I think it's up to the business really, I think it's a two-way street. I think first the business really needs to communicate their vision, and a lot, we encourage these joint planning sessions and periodic visioning sessions to do just this, where the IT group really kind of hears it from the business. It's like, hey, this is what we want to do with it, and this is why it's important to the business. And conversely, the IT group can also share, hey, have you ever considered the fact that if we put mobile technology or cloud technology, that you would be able to do this, or we would be able to do this faster, or cut costs here and there. So I think it's kind of a shared responsibility to provide vision back and forth between the two groups. But I think in this case that would be would be the recommended approach. Chris, anything?
So I think this is definitely a question we struggle with technology. So my team mostly works with the technology groups, kind of supporting the business, and we hear concerns all the time. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I think we see it from two sides. One side is people that are scared of their jobs, right? Frankly, right? So I'm going to move this out to the cloud. My job's going to go away. Right? We do see some pushback going in that way. What we advise those type of clients is, listen, it's going to happen with or without you. So get on board. The Marines moniker, lead follow. I think it's the Marines. Lead follow, get out of the way. You got to do that. If that is your concern, you got to get over it. So that's one that we see. The other side is a real concern, I think, that IT has, which is security. There are many ways to, in the cloud, to secure information. I think you can work with your IT partners to make sure that they're satisfied that one of your main corporate assets is well protected. So I think you should engage them as you're talking to the cloud vendors, as moving your business function out into the cloud, how security can be brought into that. And also that your data architecture teams can be a part of this, because inevitably, if you just do a bunch of cloud solutions, you'll have a bunch of siloed solutions, and you'll want analytics to cross those siloed solutions. So there's some real skill sets within your IT teams, typically in the data architecture group, that can help ensure that the information that you're putting into maybe a very pointed cloud solution will be able to be integrated well across all the other solutions. So I think as you're talking to your IT brethren, I would recommend saying, we know that these two areas are concerns, and we really could use your help defining how to make these concerns not come true.
Well, thank you for the question. I think that about brings us to the end of our hour here with the webinar. I want to thank everybody for their time in joining us this afternoon, and on behalf of Chris and Collaborative and CBI, I'd like to say thank you, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody.